Hello and welcome back to Love Gianna. Today we're here with the amazing Dr. Barnard. Thank you for being here with us.
Hey Gianna, it's great to be here.
I actually just read your book, The Cheese Trap. I highly recommend that everybody get this and read it. It's also on Audible. I actually audio listened to it, which was easy and helpful. And I was driving and I was listening to it. And I just went to Italy, so on my way there I listened to some. On my way back I listened to some. So highly recommend reading this, the book, or Audible. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and any other books that you've written or anything that you'd like to let us know.
You bet. I'm originally from Fargo, North Dakota. You ever been there?
No.
Seen the movie?
Yes, I have a long time ago.
That's where I'm from. I'm from North Dakota, but for many years I've been living in Washington, D.C. And I went there to go to medical school. And I got to tell you, in medical school, we never talked about nutrition at all. It was all how to use medications and that kind of stuff. Nothing much about prevention. And I set up this group with a terrible name, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I say terrible because who can remember a long name like that? But it's worked for us.
Yeah.
And we set it up in 1985. And we promote kind of the things that have been neglected. We promote prevention and nutrition, and we also talk about research and doing it ethically, meaning focusing on human beings rather than cruel animal experiments, trying to kind of fix what's not quite right with medicine.
Good. Thank you for doing that.
Well, there's a lot to be done, but we're making progress.
So I have a few questions for you today. The first one is, we are all told that milk gives us strong bones. Does it really? Or does it actually deplete our bodies of calcium, and why?
You know, it's such a funny thing. We all grew up with this idea that you need milk for strong bones, and if you don't have milk, you're not going to get calcium. But if you think about it, calcium is actually an element that's in the earth, and grass grows out of the earth and it pulls that calcium with it, and a cow comes along and grabs the grass and eats it, and so some of the calcium gets in the milk, and if you drink milk, you absorb maybe a third of the calcium that was in the milk. What if instead the calcium comes out of the ground into green vegetables and you eat them directly? Hopefully not grass, but you know.
Maybe wheatgrass.
Well, yeah, okay, it could be wheatgrass, sure, or broccoli or kale or collards or Brussels sprouts, or you name it. You get the calcium directly, the absorption fraction is higher. So you do need calcium. You don't need an enormous amount necessarily, but you need some. And green vegetables are a great source. It's also in beans and many other foods, and you don't need milk. And Mother Nature still scratches her head thinking, what the heck are you doing drinking the milk from a cow? So it's all culture, it's not science.
Does it deplete our bodies of calcium? Does it weaken our bones in any way?
You know, it's an interesting question, and it's one that we have been digging into. There have been some studies that exactly the opposite of what you'd think. They show that the more milk people consume, the more fractures they have. And there are others that don't show that. So what we can say with some confidence is that it is no protection against that hip fracture that you're going to get when you're 70 years old. And there are other things we should be doing instead. And some evidence suggests that it can be harmful. And it's harmful in other ways too. Milk is linked to prostate cancer in men. It's linked to lots of digestive upsets. It seems to be a trigger for autoimmune problems like arthritis pain. Some people with migraines and other things too. So milk, it does a body bad, I guess is what you might you'd have to say.
I like that slogan. Okay, number 2, what exactly is added to cheese to make it the most processed food on the planet? What's the process? Let's also touch on pus, manure, and all that comes loaded in dairy products.
We are going to cheer everybody up, aren't we?
Yes.
So, it's funny. I got to tell you, when people come into our research center and they'll go vegan because we ask them to, because we're trying to tackle their diabetes, and they do great. But the one thing I hear them say is, I just miss cheese so much. And if you look at what's in it, it is surprising, just as you were saying. First of all, coming out of the cow, it's got lots of problems. It's one of the biggest sources of saturated fat, that's the bad fat. And then when you turn milk into cheese, they add a huge amount of salt to it. The reason they're adding salt is because they've added bacteria that are fermenting it, and you don't want them to go too far. Well, what are those bacteria? Well, if I'm making, say, a Munster cheese, what they add is called Brevibacteria. It's the same genus of bacteria that are between your toes. That's right. If your creepy roommate forgot to do the laundry for an extra long period of time, the smell you are smelling, that smells kind of like Munster cheese, yes, it's brevibacteria. And then they will add rennet to it, which comes out of the fourth stomach of a slaughtered calf. It's an enzyme to curdle it together. If they don't use that...
So they actually take it from a dead baby
Calf.
cow.
Right.
From his dead stomach.
Fourth stomach, exactly.
That's so sad and gross. Okay.
Well, it gets worse. But now, some dairies don't use that anymore, and they use a different rennet, which happens to be genetically engineered. But they don't usually write that on the cheese because they know nobody wants to buy genetically engineered cheese. So that's kind of for starters. It's, I think, hands down, just about the most unhealthy food that people eat, despite the fact that people get hooked on it.
Mm-hmm. And then, so the pus and the manure, that's also in it too.
It's because it came out of an animal, and the animal was artificially inseminated, and dairy cows have been bred to produce a lot of milk, and some of them are given hormones, growth hormones, to cause even more milk production. Their udders get distended, and they get a condition called mastitis. It's an inflammation. And so you'll see more and more and more pus, and the dairy farmers all know that the pus is in there. They just try to keep it under a certain level, but it's in every carton of milk you ever got. The manure, it's amazing. You should go to a dairy. They will take, literally, a flamethrower, and they will zap it under the udder to burn off the little hairs and to kind of sterilize whatever manure is on there. Then they put the milking things up, and there's a certain amount of manure and pus in every glass of milk. Isn't that lovely?
It's the truth, though, and I believe that everybody should know how bad it is for them and also how bad it is for the cows.
It's true. I have to say, though, cow's milk is not entirely unique, because if you went into the store and looked at the chicken carcasses that they're selling, many of them have salmonella and other things that come from chicken manure. That's not going to happen, obviously, if you're consuming plant products.
Exactly.
But it's a big problem with animal agriculture.
Number 3, what are casomorphins?
The casein protein, it's the main protein in cow's milk, and it breaks apart in your digestion, and the protein from milk, casein, releases morphine-like compounds in the blood, and scientists call them casomorphins. They attach to the very same receptor in the brain that morphine or heroin would attach to. And so they're not as strong. The strongest one has about 1/10 the brain binding power compared to pure morphine. It's not strong enough to get you arrested, but it's just strong enough to get to make you want cheese. I think it's part of why cheese is so addicting.
So it's similar to drugs in the addiction category.
It is. It is a narcotic. It's an opiate. There are traces of it that we presume are in milk to maybe calm the calf or bond the calf with mother or something like that. It's also in human milk to a degree, but you turn milk into cheese, and the casein is concentrated. So I sometimes, because the casomorphins are so concentrated in cheese, I call it dairy crack. People might like milk, but they crave cheese.
Okay, number 4. How does a vegan diet known for slimming people down help a bodybuilder or athlete stay muscular? How do they stay big or bulky if they want to?
It's a funny thing. So many athletes, less now, but still some of them, have this idea, I want muscle, so I need to eat muscle. It's sort of like the idea, if I want to be smart, I should eat brains. It's in Asia, some people think if I want to perform sexually, I need to eat rhino horn. You know what I'm talking about. It's this kind of pathetic adolescent idea. But there are a lot of guys who think to get muscle, I need to eat muscle, and it's completely wrong. So many athletes, as you know, nowadays are going vegan because you take the strongest animal, take a bull, take a cow, take a stallion or a mare, or you take a gorilla or an elephant. Any of these humongously muscular animals are not eating muscle. They get their muscle from plant sources. It's the cleanest protein you can get. And a lot of athletes, it started off with runners, and then tennis players like Novak Djokovic, who just won Wimbledon and the US Open.
Nice.
Serena Williams, Venus Williams, all these people at the top of their game have been doing vegan for a long time. They recover faster. They have less inflammation. Their endurance is just an edge better. The top of the Formula One world is Lewis Hamilton from England. He's the best racing driver in the world.
Nice.
And he's been vegan for a long time. And he concentrates well. He feels good. You don't want to have big tuna sandwich with cheese, with all that fat in your bloodstream.
Right.
It's not going to help your athletic potential.
So it doesn't
Yes.
it doesn't give them an upper hand to eat dairy or whey or
No.
flesh in any way that eating plant-based protein would.
The plant-based proteins are better. First of all, you get all the essential amino acids you need, by far more than enough, even for the most vigorous athlete.
Nice.
Secondly, they don't have the bad stuff that is interfering with you if you eat meat. If you eat meat, along with the protein comes saturated fat, which slows blood flow, that slows oxygenation, that hurts your performance, plus cholesterol. And that's why people end up with a coach syndrome, meaning 10 or 12 years after their football career is they're retiring, then they're starting to have heart disease and all these things from the unclean food they've been eating.
Number 5, what exactly is whey? Why is it so unhealthy? And what is a good substitute for it for athletes or bodybuilders?
It's a funny thing, whey, W-H-E-Y, whey protein. You go to the health food store, and it's in a big tin, and the bodybuilders are told, you got to get this whey protein. It's kind of a mythology that was designed actually by the dairy industry. When you make cheese, you take milk, and you have to take all the whey out. Whey is this liquid mixed with lactose, sugar, and some protein. And they drain it away, and for years, the cheese industry didn't know what to do with it. You have this liquidy goo. They would throw it in landfills. They would throw it all kinds of places. Somebody got the bright idea that if you dehydrate it and sell the powder to bodybuilders and tell them that this is good protein for you, that they would buy it, and they do. It costs more than cheese. And so it's just been a moneymaker for the cheese industry. It's a cast-off waste product, and there is no better muscle building with whey protein or anything like that.
You're being duped. Don't buy into the whey.
It's a funny thing.
Number 6, what are your thoughts about low-carb, high-protein diets like the keto diet, the paleo diet, anything low-carb, high-protein?
Yeah, well, it comes from every 5 or 6 years, the low-carb diets come up again. It's Atkins, then it died out, then it was South Beach, then it died out. Now it's keto, and it'll die out again, it'll come back. And it's based on this idea that we get fat from eating bread or rice or potatoes. But if you look at the populations that eat the most carbohydrate, they're the skinniest of anybody. I'm talking about rural Japan. Before McDonald's showed up, they were eating rice and noodles and a pretty high carbohydrate diet. They were skinny, they lived longer than everybody else. They had very little diabetes and so forth. And that's true in this country. When you look at people who transition to a vegan diet, instead of avoiding carbs, you're eating the healthy carbs. Things like rice and beans and sweet potatoes and so forth.
And lots of fruit.
Lots of fruit. And the weight loss is better. When people go on a low-carb diet, that leaves them with meat, gravy. Those things have a lot of bad fat. And a fair number of low-carb dieters, their cholesterols go up. And over the long run, there's been enough time to track how they do. Their mortality is also higher too. So it's an unhealthy thing, but for some reason, it's kind of back to the eat muscle kind of thing.
I know. In your book, The Cheese Trap, it talks about how people say plant-based diets are so restrictive. And with the keto diet or low-carb diets, that is really a restrictive diet. You can't eat fruit, you can't eat potatoes, you can't eat rice, you can't eat bread, you can't eat pasta. And at the end of the day, I think people just want any excuse to eat meat and cheese. And to call a plant-based diet that's packed with thousands of nourishing varieties of fruits and vegetables and foods, to call that restrictive is just crazy to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's because people haven't tried it and they're not too sure. When I was a kid, growing up in North Dakota, we had roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn every day. Except for special occasions, it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and peas. And that's like what I knew about food. Well, I live in Washington, D.C. now, and it's like LA or any other big city. There is Italian food, and Mexican food, and Chinese food, and Japanese food, and they all do vegan really well. And Thai, and Korean, and Afghani, and all these cultures that have a million wonderful kinds of totally plant-based foods. If you told me, can't have any of that, go back to your roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn. To me, that's a restrictive diet.
Me too. Me too.
I just eat chicken breast, or some people eating egg white or whatever. No, you're much better off with a plant-based diet.
Number 7, let's talk about dairy's effects on fertility and how it causes men's sperm to be abnormal and less concentrated.
This was very troubling. It started out in Rochester, New York. Researchers went into a fertility clinic and they showed that men who ate the most cheese had noticeably low sperm counts, much lower than the men who were not eating cheese or not so much. And the question was, is there something in cheese that's doing this? Well, of course there is. There's estrogen in cheese. Here's where it got there. The cows are artificially inseminated on every dairy farm. Once a year, they're inseminated, they get pregnant, because if they're not pregnant, they don't produce milk. They have to be impregnated, give birth, then they make milk. So the farmers impregnate them every year, not personally, but they arrange for this to be done. And a cow is pregnant for about 9 months out of every 12. A pregnant cow makes estrogen, and that gets into the milk, and you can measure it. And it's not a lot, but it's there. And when you turn the milk into cheese, the estrogens are concentrated. And so we don't know enough about this, but what we believe is happening and why the men had low sperm counts is because they're eating a fair amount of cheese. It's got female hormones in it. It's interfering with sperm production. What worries me more, I have to tell you, there was a study here in California among women who had previously been treated for breast cancer, large group of women. And what they got on their mind is, I hope this cancer never comes back. What they found was that those who consumed the most high-fat dairy, that's butter and cheese really, they had a 49% higher risk of dying of their cancer compared to the women who generally avoided that. And again, we're not sure what's going on, but what we think is happening is that the traces of extra estrogens that you're getting from the cheese is fueling the growth of cancer cells.
And that's different from the hormones in soy, because everybody's afraid of soy.
Soy is completely the opposite. Soy does not increase cancer risk, it decreases cancer risk. Let's just take a minute on that if we can.
Yes,
very important. 1931, I think it was, in soy products were found to have isoflavones. And their chemical structure is somewhat like testosterone or estrogen or other hormones. And so people thought, well, maybe they'll have effects like estrogen or testosterone. And this mythology grew that maybe a woman who consumes it would get breast cancer, or maybe a man who consumes soy would get breast development or become feminine or lose fertility or something. And we've had plenty of time to study this. And the first thing is that men who consume soy do not have fertility problems. And if anyone doubts that, look at China or Japan or anywhere else where soy is a big part of their diet, and you will soon discover fertility is not impaired. We have had many studies on soy and breast cancer. And the women who consume the most soy milk, tempeh, tofu, have about 30% less breast cancer compared to other women. And then most important, the women who have had breast cancer in the past, some of them are told by a well-meaning but ill-informed doctor, I wouldn't have soy because I think there's something in it that could be bad. The women who avoid soy do the worst. The women who have the most soy have, again, about a 30% improvement, a 30% reduction in the likelihood that the cancer will come back.
Interesting.
So I'm not promoting soy, you don't have to have it. A plant-based diet doesn't mean you're the tofu cheerleading club, but it's very versatile product. You can make everything you'd want to out of it, and it does reduce cancer risk roughly 30%.
So number 8 was pretty much about soy. A lot of people fear soy because of estrogen hormones.
Right.
But I said, let's talk about hormones in dairy and also bovine growth hormone. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
And how does that affect our hormones?
Not every dairy farm does it, but many do, where they inject bovine growth hormone into the dairy cow. And the whole idea is per unit feed, I want to drive as much milk production out of this cow as I can. So they force them into an abnormal physiological state with the growth hormone. It's not entirely clear what the health dangers are of it beyond the hormones that the cow is making anyway. Because even without the injection, the cow is dumping hormones into the milk, which we're learning about more and more. But interestingly, it's not legal to label a carton of milk hormone-free if you're a farmer that doesn't use the injections, because the FDA says all dairy has hormones. Whether you're injecting it or the cow is making it, it's all got hormones, so the kid is going to be drinking estrogen or some other other hormones, no matter where the cow, where the milk is from. And that, in fact, is true.
And so how does that affect our hormones? Like, what does that do to the human body? Does it give us skin issues? Does it give us eczema, acne?
Well, yes, I mean, all those things can happen, but I'm guessing that the hormones, which are principally estrogens, because it's from a pregnant cow,
right.
There I think the risks probably are, especially breast cancer over the long run, infertility, endometriosis. These are anything where you're driving too much hormone into the body. Those are the risks that we would look at. But you do see acne and you see eczema and other things. I am assuming, I think it's true, that the culprit there is not so much the hormone as the dairy protein. You'll see this with migraine too, and rheumatoid arthritis. And I don't ask anyone to take this on faith. If you have any of these conditions, set aside the dairy for a while. And what many people discover, their joints don't hurt anymore, or the migraines stop coming. It's the protein was causing your body to react to it and causing all these symptoms.
Number 9, is type 2 diabetes curable and type 1 preventable? Are sugars really the problem in diabetes?
Yes, no. Is type 2 diabetes curable? It is. What we learned in our research, especially a study that we published in 2006, we were funded by NIH to test a plant-based diet for type 2 diabetes. And the reason that the National Institutes of Health wanted to fund us to do it is there's been a lot of evidence that plant-based diets are great for diabetes. That if you look at people who have just chosen this kind of diet on their own, their diabetes rates are really low. So we put it to the test, and it was a long, very careful study, and we started to see something that, I gotta tell you, Gianna, I never saw this in medical school. I never, ever saw diabetes disappear.
It's miraculous.
It is absolutely amazing to see a person who's had diabetes for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and then they get very rapidly, they get better and better and better, and the diabetes can go away. Now, word of caution, do the diet now. Don't wait 5 years. Because if a person's had type 2 diabetes for a long time, it's harder and harder to reverse it because it's been damaging their pancreas. Type 1 diabetes, that's the one that starts usually in kids or young adults. The process is that something is killing off the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. And that something, we believe, starts with dairy protein. That the kid, a baby, should be drinking mother's milk, human milk. If the child is exposed to milk from a cow, either as baby formula or maybe after breastfeeding is finished or whatever, the cow's milk is recognized as foreign. The baby makes antibodies to just try to destroy it, and those antibodies end up destroying the child's own pancreas. Doesn't happen with every kid, but some children who have perhaps genetic vulnerability, then they get the dairy protein, and bingo, it starts this reaction of destroying their insulin-producing cells. And my message is breastfeed kids. If you can't, do not use a dairy-based formula. Use a soy-based formula, that is way better.
And would you recommend mothers breastfeeding to stay away from dairy?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. You know, we didn't understand this at all years ago, but what the mother consumes really affects her breast milk, including if she consumes cow's milk, some of the proteins, surprisingly large protein molecules, will get from her stomach into her blood, into her breast milk, and hit the child. And the way this was discovered, there were researchers in St. Louis who were looking at why are these kids colicky? It's like nursing babies, crying all the time. And we've known for a long time that, say, a formula-fed baby might be colicky. And they thought, could there be cow's milk proteins in a woman's breast milk? And the answer is yes, that if she consumes milk, cheese, that some of the proteins get into her breast milk and hit the kid in sufficient quantity to make the child get an upset stomach.
Number 10, why are cheese and other animal products linked to Alzheimer's disease and memory loss? What foods are good for the brain? You
know, if you make a list of all the things you never want to happen to you or somebody you love, Alzheimer's is at like the top of the list, because when you got Alzheimer's, you have lost everything.
I know. It's so sad and so scary.
It is. And in Chicago, back in 1993, a research study called the Chicago Health and Aging Project started tracking what people eat and linking it to Alzheimer's risk. And one of the first things they found was what's called saturated fat, bad fat. It's like bacon grease, that kind of thing. But the number one source is not bacon. There's a lot of it in bacon. There's a lot of it in sausage. There's a lot of it in meat. But
Can I guess?
I think you're going to guess.
Cheese?
Cheese and dairy products in general. Cheese, butter, whole milk, whole yogurt. These have more saturated fat than any other food. And because your average American now is consuming about 35 pounds of cheese in a year, that's, by the way, that's 60,000 calories that they don't need. It's just from cheese. They're getting this big load of saturated fat. And as the years go by, the people who consume the most bad fat, saturated fat, their risk of getting Alzheimer's is about tripled.
Oh my goodness.
Now, that's just for starters. I mean, there are lots of other contributors, but job one, get that out of your diet.
You know, everybody associates cheese with pizza and fun, and when we're little, we have it at the arcades and parties, and people need to associate cheese with Alzheimer's and with dementia and with inflammatory diseases and death and heart disease, and it's not fun, it's scary.
And I think it's one of the biggest reasons why kids are getting pudgy. When kids are roly-poly and pudgy, their parents will say, "You're not exercising enough." And I want to say, parents, stop blaming your kid in that way. Exercise has nothing to do with that. Exercise is good, but a lack of exercise is not the reason kids are gaining weight, and it's not soda either. Mm-hmm. Soda is not health food. You know, we should throw the sodas away. But the soda consumption has been dropping for about 20 years. Good. That's good, but obesity is not dropping. Mm-hmm. If soda was the reason, all the kids should be skinny. That's not it. Cheese is going up, 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 up. It's loaded with fat, very high in calories, and I think it's probably the biggest reason.
Okay, number 11. Are we all technically lactose intolerant?
Very important question. Lactose is the sugar in milk, and there's a lot of it in milk. In fact, if a person doesn't drink whole milk and they take the fat out and now you got skim milk, the main nutrient is lactose sugar. It's a sugary beverage. It's kind of like soda, really. But lactose sugar is not really digestible for most people. When you're a little baby, you have enzymes that break it down, and so you can digest your mother's milk. But after your age of weaning, Mother Nature thought, you don't need these enzymes anymore, so it takes them away. And at that point, if you have milk, you can't digest the sugar, and bacteria ferment it, and it causes bloating and gas and upset stomach. And that's true for most people, blacks, Asians, Native Americans, except from dairy-consuming parts of Europe and the Middle East, a mutation entered the human genome that allows that lactase enzyme to persist a little bit longer. So many whites are not lactose intolerant, at least not early in life. And they're apparently the one that's making all the rules, telling everybody you have to have a glass of milk every day. And I got to tell you, it's a terrible thing. If let's say I'm a 16-year-old African-American kid, and I go to school and they say, you got to take the milk. And I'll say, well, I got football practice later this afternoon. Yeah. If I drink that milk, I'm going to be in the bathroom when I ought to be in the locker room. Mm-hmm. It's going to upset my stomach. I'm going to have to go home. By law, federal law, a school is not allowed to offer an alternative to cow's milk to kids in school unless the kid brings a note from a doctor or a parent saying he's got a medical condition or disability. And, to tell a kid you're disabled, lactose intolerance is normal. It's absolutely normal. It just means you're beyond the age of weaning. You don't need milk in your diet. Now, to tell you the truth, you don't really need soy milk or almond milk or anything, but if that's what you can digest, give it to the kids. Right. But that's the law right now, and hopefully that will change.
Well, you have a team of attorneys that help fight these things, correct? Fight these laws, and you guys win most of the time because it's truth.
Oh, well, yeah, and happily, not just us, the American Medical Association, June 2018, passed a resolution unanimously saying, change that law.
Wow.
You don't think of the AMA as being on the forefront of nutritional advocacy, but they've been really good. By the way, they also said, if you're in the hospital, vegan meals ought to be there with you.
Yes, please, yes. I've always said that in jails, too.
Yeah, exactly. That passed in California.
Really?
Hospitals and prisons now, by law,
good job, California,
have to serve vegan meals.
Nice.
We will take some credit for that.
Yay! Good job, good job.
Exactly.
Number 12, is veal a direct result of the dairy industry? Let's touch on what exactly happens to the babies and the entire process.
People think of cheese or ice cream as fun. go to the dairy and watch what actually it takes to make it. And at the risk of being a little graphic, here is what happens to every dairy cow every year. The farmhands come in, they take a glove, it goes all the way up to their shoulder, and they stick their left hand into the cow's rectum, all the way up to their elbow, because through the rectal wall, they can feel the uterus through the rectal wall. Mm-hmm. They then take their right hand and they pull up what looks like a knitting needle, and they jam it through the cervix, and they inject semen that they took from a bull.
And did they have to masturbate the bull?
Let me put it this way. These animals are not volunteers.
Right.
None of them.
So they both get raped, essentially.
Yes. No, she's not going to fight you because she's chained up.
Right.
She can't move, and this is going to happen to her whether she wants. And obviously, she doesn't want it. Mm-hmm. But no, the animals are not impregnated with Barry Manilow records and chocolate and roses, and no, they are artificially inseminated. 9 months later, she gives birth, and despite the fact she didn't ask to get pregnant, she's given birth. And she looks down in the hay, and there's her baby. And the baby looks up at the mother, and the baby's like this awkward, gangly little baby, and they try to stand up, and they fall down. They try to stand up, they fall down. And the mother starts to kind of help them and lick them and clean them up. And the farmhands all gather around, and they go, oh, this just gets me every time. Because the mother-infant bond is a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. However, very soon they all realize this is a dairy. And if the baby nurses from the mother, you've got no milk to sell. So they have an implement that solves that problem. It's called a wheelbarrow. And they take the calf they pick up the calf by the chest and throw him in the wheelbarrow and bring him out of the room. And the mother has bonded with her baby, and she fights, and she will call out, and then a gate will slam.
I've seen it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you stay there all night long, she's standing there crying, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And the baby's crying back. If the baby is male, there's no future for that baby. That baby is going to be killed for veal. And that's the only reason they have them is because they want a pregnant cow to make milk. And so they kill all the male calves that she has. If the baby is female, the dairy will say, there's a future for you in this industry. And they stick her, but she can't be with her mother. They give her a milk replacer. They cut her horns off with a process called dehorning. Sometimes they do it called disbudding. They just scrape it right out of the skull. It's
with no anesthesia.
It's the creepiest, yes, correct. It's the creepiest procedure you can imagine. And then so meanwhile, the mother gets impregnated again every year until she's about 4. Now, in nature, a cow will live to be about 20. But when she's about 4, on American farms, they figure, I'm not getting as much milk out of you as I used to. So what if I kill you and put your daughter in there? We'll rape her. We'll take her kids away, and we're going to get milk out of her. And when she's 4, we'll kill her. And it's just this constant impregnating the cows, taking their babies away, selling their milk, and then it's a creepy thing. And I don't know if it's too much to say that when we start to realize how the female of the species, including the human species, just gets abused constantly by people who've got some other agenda. And I would like our compassion to not be limited maybe to our own daughters and our own sisters, but think about what these animals go through for the service of what?
I know.
And let me tell you something. If you took all the cows in this country, you put them all on one side of a balance, and all the humans put them on the other side, the cows outweigh us by far. There's close to 100 million of them. Each one is as big as a sofa, and they're belching out methane, and that's one of the biggest greenhouse gas contributors as well. So we grew up with it. We thought it's normal. It's the craziest kind of food production there could be.
This reminds me, I wanted to read this passage from your book about that. It says, I learned that dairy cows are killed and that their calves are killed too, and that before death they live lives of misery. Think about taking an animal, forcing her to have a baby, taking her baby away and stealing her milk. That is bullying. The most powerful bond we know of is the bond between mother and child, and we break it in order to make comfort foods for ourselves. At a New York art gallery, an art student offered 3 varieties of cheese made from milk donated by breastfeeding mothers. It was not a hit. A writer for the Village Voice wrote, there is something fundamentally disgusting about it. No one knows what the effect of human breast milk on adults will be. The milk contains a complex mixture of nutrients, hormones, and antibodies formulated by Mother Nature not for adults, but the youngest babies, which raises the obvious question, if it is so disgusting to make cheese from human milk, is cow's milk any better? After all, it was produced in the body of a cow for her baby, not for humans of any age. It's so powerful and so true and so unnecessary.
You know, I've written about 20 books, and it's always health,
Yeah.
you know, but this one, because I went into dairies and I saw what was going on, I thought, I can't not include that part of it.
Thank you.
And frankly, I hope that if there's somebody who reads that part and they think, you know, I don't want to eat cheese for that reason, their coronary arteries, let me tell you, they don't care why we change, you know. So whatever motivates us is good.
Exactly. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video for more. Love, Gianna.
And Neal Barnard, too.